I think I.
Hello and welcome to another conversation with Carl. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe for the latest content. Today we are excited to talk all things theme parks and welcome Arthur Levine, a veteran theme park journalist with over 30 years of experience covering the attractions industry, including 20 years as the theme park expert for Trip Savvy and About.com. He runs the Arthur's About Theme Park Substack and frequently contributes to Fun World, USA Today, and other major outlets. Welcome, Arthur Levine, to the conversation.
It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you so much for doing this. So before we get to everything theme parks, can you give me like a brief history of amusement parks?
Well, how far back do you want to go, Carl? We can go back to the 1500s, I believe, when in Russia there were things known as ice slides. And as it sort of sounds, these were slides that people took up to the top of mountains and slid down. And these were sort of the precursors to roller coasters. And interestingly, they were popularized by Catherine the Great, who was a big fan of these ice slides. And I believe she may have had something to do later in her life with during the months when there was no ice on the mountains. She had wheels put on the bottom of these slides so that people could continue to enjoy the thrill of going downhill. So, way back to then, in the late 1500s, there is a park called Bakken in Denmark that exists to this day. That when it began, there were no mechanical rides, of course, but they were more like pleasure gardens. And these were popular throughout Europe, where people would convene, and it would be a place to sort of escape city life. And there would be activities for people to do. So these are kind of the precursors to the to what we think of as theme parks today. But if you're looking at sort of the modern day amusement park or theme park, if we go to the late 1800s, there are a couple of events that I can mention that sort of were the key influencers of what we think of today as the modern day amusement park. One is the World's Columbian Exposition, which was in Chicago, a World's Fair, and among its highlights was the Ferris wheel, the world's first Ferris wheel. And this was at the time a modern engineering marvel. And the Ferris wheel was located on what was known as the Midway Plaisance. And it's sort of the prototype of the modern day amusement park Midway, where it was sort of an avenue that people could travel down, and there were things to do, amusements of sorts on either side of the Midway, and I believe that the Ferris wheel was sort of at the end of this Midway Plaisance. And then we go to places like Coney Island in the late 1800s, early, where seaside amusement areas became very popular. Again, a way for folks to escape city life and gather together and cool down in the summer. And little by little, amusements, including roller coasters and carousels, were introduced at places like this. I can also mention another kind of interesting development for the amusement park were what is known as trolley parks. I don't know if you're familiar with the term trolley park, but in the late 1800s, there were trolley companies in virtually every community. This is the way that people were able to travel around. And on the weekend, people were not using the trolleys because they were using them during the week to commute to work. And on the weekend, they sat dormant. Well, somebody came up with the great idea at the end of the trolley line, let's put what became known as trolley parks, so that people on the weekend and on holidays would ride the trolleys to the trolley park. And again, there were carousels and roller coasters and other amusements. And there were thousands of these trolley parks, or hundreds of these trolley parks, I should say, across the United States and in other parts of the world as well. Today, only 14 trolley parks remain, but they were very kind of key in the development of the amusement park.
Well, today it seems like you started talking about Coney Island, and you have the Cyclone, which was from 1926.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been around for, I guess, 100 years this year. I love the Cyclone, but they keep making rides that are scarier. That ride seems like a safe place to go, the Cyclone. But when I look at the new ones, do you go on all these rides?
If you're talking about sort of extreme thrill
Yeah.
roller coasters and other thrill rides, yes, that's kind of my beat. So yes, I do go on rides, and you're right, Carl. They've become much more extreme, much more thrilling, really pushing the envelope, higher G forces, higher height. In fact, the world's tallest, fastest roller coaster recently opened in Saudi Arabia. It's called Six Flags Qiddiya, and the name of the coaster is Falcon's Flight. And this thing is absolutely crazy. It goes 640 feet tall, if you can believe that, and it hits a top speed of 155 miles per hour, which is incredibly fast. When you're talking about something like the Coney Island Cyclone, I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but that's something more like maybe 50 miles per hour, and you're talking about maybe a little over 100 feet tall. So this is considerably faster. But all of these rides are built to very strict engineering standards, and the folks that are designing them take into consideration human tolerance. And although the G-forces are quite extreme, they're not to the level that they're going to cause any physical harm. So really, rides like Falcon's Flight and the Cyclone at Coney Island, they're all designed to sort of give you the illusion of danger, but really you're quite safe. And it's really about kind of tricking your body into thinking that you're in danger to get that adrenaline rush. And that's part of the thrill of amusement parks and part of the thrill of thrill rides.
So what makes a good theme park?
Well, we were talking about, you asked me if I could kind of give the history of parks. I didn't carry it forward a bit because there is a distinction between an amusement park and a theme park. You just asked me about theme parks. And the theme park really, there are examples of it arguably prior to Disneyland, but really when Walt Disney came up with the idea of Disneyland and opened it in 1955, that really changed the industry considerably. And what he did was take sort of some of the principles of amusement parks. Yes, there are mechanical rides. There weren't any when it first opened, but eventually there are roller coasters at Disneyland now and in other theme parks. But an amusement park generally is sort of a hodgepodge of, as you walk down the midway, and there may be a merry-go-round, and there may be a roller coaster, and there may be spinning rides and fun houses and dark rides. And they don't necessarily follow any coherent theme. They're just kind of a mishmash of rides. What Walt Disney did was sort of take the principles of filmmaking. I mean, he came from the world of animation and of films, and he designed Disneyland with these different themed lands. You're not just encountering a ride for the sake of a ride. You're going into Adventureland or Tomorrowland or Fantasyland, and you're going on maybe a boat ride or a roller coaster, but the roller coaster is in Tomorrowland and it's Space Mountain and it's themed to space. So, and he used the principles of movie making, things like lighting and color and architecture, to kind of
That's Space Mountain, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about, in general, I'm talking about what Walt Disney did was take the principles of movie making and kind of create a three-dimensional movie in which the people who come to the park are now sort of active participants in this sort of real-life movie, if you will. And so that's kind of the difference between a theme park and amusement park. A place like Coney Island, which is still entertaining folks today, very much the way it did over 100 years ago, is in general just, again, sort of a hodgepodge of rides. But a place like Disneyland or the Universal parks or some of the other parks, they adhere to a theme where you're immersed in this environment and you become sort of as I said, an active member of this, an active participant in this story. And the rides are a means to sort of convey the story.
Yeah, because Disney's for everybody, I would say. It's not just for kids. When you go into Disney, it makes everyone a kid at heart again. When you get there, you realize that. And like when you were talking about Space Mountain, it really does feel like you could be on a movie set. You are going up to space when you start to make the ascent. You go through all the colored lights, and that's, I see like how he created that. So we seem to have an insatiable appetite for extreme thrills. The closer we can perceive death approaching without dying, the better. Why do you think this is?
I've actually written about this. It's sort of in our genetic code. We are hunter gatherers, and we have the fight flight syndrome, for example. Back in the day when we encountered a saber-toothed tiger, when we were out on the hunt for food, we needed to either fight or get the heck out of there. And that fight flight syndrome does things like produce adrenaline, and our eyes dilate and our pulses quicken. And we have this sort of feeling of elation and energy so that we can, again, escape the saber-toothed tiger. Well, in the modern day world, we go to the grocery store and our meat is shrink wrapped in the refrigerator case, and there's really no need for us to do that anymore. But we still have this sort of insatiable appetite for thrill. And when we go to a place like an amusement park or a theme park and go on a roller coaster, we're tricking our bodies into thinking that we are in danger, and we're causing this fight flight syndrome to happen. We get this adrenaline rush, and again our pulses quicken and our eyes dilate, and it's this sort of glorious feeling for those of us who embrace this kind of feeling. But we're never really in any danger. The ride is giving us the illusion that we're in danger, but we're never really in any danger. So it's a way for us in the modern world to kind of embrace this impulse that we have to experience these kinds of things. It's the same, I guess it's the same thing behind, why do people skydive, and why are there people who engage in auto racing and do these extreme things? I would argue it's probably for similar reasons. The difference is that the amusement park, the theme park's for everybody, and it's a very safe place for us to embrace these kind of thrills.
Where are the best theme parks or amusement parks?
Well, that's a very subjective question, Carl. And people often ask me, what's my favorite theme park or amusement park? And it's really difficult for me to answer that because I virtually love them all. A place like Coney Island is very, very different from a place like Disneyland or Universal Studios, but I love them both. And so it's hard to say, where's the best. I can tell you where the most popular are, the ones that are attracting the most guests. That would be the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, and that is the most popular theme park in the world. I believe it's upwards of around 17 million folks a year who visit the Magic Kingdom. The Disney parks and the Universal parks are kind of they kind of take up most of those top positions worldwide for the most attended parks. So, that's one way of looking at it, but there are some wonderful kind of under the radar hidden gem parks that may not get the attendance and may not be as well known, but there are some wonderful parks throughout the world and right here in the United States as well. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for thrills, you're probably going to want to go to a place like perhaps Cedar Point or Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey, where they have some incredible roller coasters and wild thrills. If you're looking more for places that have big budget attractions and very immersive lands and experiences, then, the Universal and Disney parks are kind of catering to that.
Well, Disney's very easy once you get there. Once you put the watch on and you're walking around and you don't even realize you're spending money and you just have a very good time. So let's discuss the figures. How much money do amusement parks and theme parks generate annually in the US?
I don't have that factor figure off the top of my head. I don't know, but it is an enormous business. I can tell you this, that historically, the Walt Disney Company, of course, has different divisions. They have obviously their studios. They own television stations. There's merchandise. And they own theme parks, among other businesses that they have. And the theme park part of their business has consistently generated enormous amounts of revenue and has been a high percentage of their overall income that they generate every year. And that's even more true now, I think, with movies maybe not having quite the same impact that they did before in the world that we live in now, but the theme parks for Disney and for NBC Universal remain an enormously profitable and important part of their business. So we're talking about billions and billions of dollars worldwide. The amusement industry is an enormous industry that many, many people embrace, and many people are spending lots and lots of money at.
What is the vetting process for new rides? How do they pick a new ride? Just to
Well,
scare us more and more?
it depends, I guess. If you're talking about companies like Disney and Universal, I think they're doing a lot of research to try to figure out what it is that will be appealing to folks. They're not just looking at the thrill level, which you were just kind of getting at, Carl. I mean, that's one piece of it. They're also looking at, these days, a lot of the rides focus on IP, intellectual property. That wasn't always the case, but most of the big attractions that especially Disney and Universal are creating these days are tied to intellectual properties like Harry Potter, Fast and Furious, or any number of different properties. Of course, with Disney, they have all their animated franchises, and whether it's the Muppets or Frozen or whatever the case may be, they want to make sure that if they're going to be investing a lot of money in these attractions, and attractions these days can cost an enormous amount of money, they want to make sure that the appeal will be there, that people will want to come and ride a Fast and Furious coaster, for example, at Universal Studios Hollywood. And so that's I think a big part of it. They're also probably looking at the technology and the engineering that goes into these different attractions. What can they do that will provide a different experience, and um, how can they offer something that will be so outrageous and unlike anything that people could experience at home, that will make them want to plan a trip to go to a theme park or to get in their car and drive to the amusement park, or whatever it may be. So those, I think, are some of the considerations that companies consider when they're developing new theme park attractions or amusement park rides.
Occasionally, when you're watching the news, you'll see people stuck on a roller coaster. And we've talked about this a little bit already about that you say amusement parks are safe, but how safe are amusement parks? And how often are people getting stuck? I imagine it's very small because otherwise these amusement parks wouldn't be in business.
Yeah, it's relatively rare, but I think it's important to point out sometimes the media will sensationalize these things. You talk about riders being stuck on a roller coaster. When that happens, often it is for a very deliberate reason. It actually has to do with the safety protocols that are built into the ride. If the ride is stopped, that may mean that if it had continued, there may have been an incident in which case people would be in great danger, but instead, because of the safety mechanisms that are built into the ride, it stopped. And when it stopped, there are procedures in place to evacuate passengers and have them walk downstairs and get safely, be safely. Be, they're able to be evacuated safely and have avoided any possible danger. So, and again, as I said, I think the media will sometimes sensationalize incidents like that. They're exceedingly rare, and when they do happen, again, it could be for a very good reason. But in the vast majority of cases, amusement parks and theme parks are very, very safe places. I've seen stats listed where it's actually more dangerous play different sports, or to certainly driving in the car to and from the amusement park is much more dangerous than actually being in the amusement park. So these are, I think, important things to consider when you're looking at safety at amusement parks and theme parks.
We talked a little bit about the roller coaster in Saudi Arabia. It was 640 feet. Do height and speed go together? Because I think the old school roller coasters, and I might be wrong in this, like they weren't as high. We're talking about Space Mountain. It doesn't seem as high. It just seems it's in the dark. Do height and speed go together? They want as high and then they want a big drop?
Not necessarily. In the old days, that was definitely true because roller coasters were really functions of gravity. A chain lift would take the train of cars up a lift hill to some high point. And in the early days of coasters, that high point may have been 40, 50, 60, maybe up to 100 feet tall. And from there, gravity would take over. And so the speed would be dependent on the height of the lift hill. These days, there are launch systems that are incorporated into many roller coasters. And so you don't necessarily need to go high to attain, you don't necessarily need to go particularly high to get high speed. And there are some examples of roller coasters that use magnetic propulsion or hydraulic launches or different ways to get up to speed where they'll leave the station and in a matter of seconds on a straightaway without climbing any hill at all, they'll be hitting 60, 70, 80, 90, over 100 miles an hour. So it's not necessarily tied together, although with a more traditional roller coaster, yes, height and speed do go together. You mentioned Space Mountain. It's interesting. It's sort of a great example of the storytelling that I was talking about earlier with theme parks and how, it's the storytelling aspect, the immersiveness that distinguishes a theme park from an amusement park. And part of the story of Space Mountain is that you're blasting off into space. And as you said, Carl, you're in the dark. And under the cloak of darkness, you kind of have the illusion of fast speed. But really, and again, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but I believe that Space Mountain does not go any faster than maybe 28, 29 miles an hour. I believe it's under 30 miles an hour or right around 30 miles an hour.
I
But
thought it was 35, but you're right. But maybe it is 28, 29. I'm not.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's surprisingly low. You feel like you're going much faster, and that's certainly way, way less than the 155 miles an hour that people are going on Falcon's flight in Saudi Arabia and on that roller coaster. But again, it's all about perception. It's all about telling that story. It's about sort of tricking us, and that's something that theme park and attraction designers are sort of expert at creating illusion and putting us in these three-dimensional spaces where we kind of can't believe what's happening to us and we're being transported to other worlds and having these experiences that seem impossible to experience, and we're doing things that we're otherwise unable to do anywhere else but at the theme park.
And can we change gears a little bit and talk about carousels?
I do know that the golden age of carousels was the late 1800s, early 1900s. And this is when artisans, mostly from Europe, many of whom came to America, and many of whom were sort of centered around Coney Island. That was kind of the epicenter of the amusement industry. These great craftsmen from Germany and other places hand-carved these beautiful horses. And it's not just horses. There are carousels known as menagerie machines, and mostly they have horses, but they have other animals as well. It might be giraffes and unicorns and zebras and other kinds of animals. And I know that in the early days of carousels, I live in Massachusetts, and we were talking about trolley parks, and one of the earliest trolley parks is a place called Salem Willows, which is in Salem, Massachusetts. And they had a carousel that does not exist now. The carousel building is still there. You can see the circular building. They had a carousel that was powered by, I believe it was a burro, who was in the basement of the building and walked in a circle, and that's how the carousel was powered.
Wow.
So that's one way to get a carousel moving. In the early days, there were steam engines. Now, of course, there are electrical motors that make the carousels go. They're beautiful examples. I believe there may be, I think that I read recently, that there are about 300 remaining intact operational carousels from that golden era. And they're beautiful pieces of Americana, beautiful pieces of art that people can experience. If people take the time to look at the horses, the bejeweled horses with their beautiful, intricate, hand-carved, the artistry is just really something to behold. They, in their own ways, are transportive and are able to kind of take people back in time. And I love carousels.
And then I ask this a lot because it's on everyone's mind about AI, and I'm not sure if you know it. How is AI going to play into the future of amusement parks and theme parks?
Well, I'm sure it's going to play a big role in amusement parks and theme parks as it is with virtually everything. I think AI is an unstoppable force at this point, for good or for bad. Before I answer that question, Carl, maybe we can just step back a bit,
Yeah.
because it kind of ties into a larger issue, which is that amusement parks and theme parks have long been places where the most cutting edge technology is showcased. And whether it's things like the Ferris wheel back at the World's Columbian Exposition, which, as I said, was this marvel of what was then modern engineering, where people could experience could experience it, or whether it's the monorail at Disneyland or the People Mover at Disneyland or 3D movies. A lot of these things had their introduction, or not necessarily their introduction, but they were places where people could go en masse and experience these kinds of technology at scale. And what's interesting about amusement parks and theme parks is that they simultaneously are showcases for modern day engineering and technology, but at the same time, they are places where we go to revel in the past and seek nostalgia. A place like Disneyland is a perfect example. It was opened in 1955, and many of its opening day attractions remain to this day. And generations of people have gone there, and now, grandparents are taking their grandkids on rides that they went on when they were little kids. And so it's kind of this curious blend of the old and the new. At the same time, in the very same day, grandparent might take their grandchild on a ride at Disneyland that, again, the grandparent may have gone on when they were a kid, and then they're going to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and going on the most cutting edge attractions in the world that are incorporating the very latest technology that you can't experience anywhere else. So it's always been kind of this curious blend. But at the heart of it, amusement parks and theme parks are highly social places. I think they're places where people want to go because they want to be together with their families, with their friends, with their community. It's a place where it's okay to scream out loud and to join other people and have these fun experiences. It doesn't matter what your political background is. People sort of come together and enjoy this highly social experience. So I don't know what role AI is going to play. I suspect, as has been the case with past technology, theme parks may be the place where we will experience things with AI maybe first, before anywhere else. But whatever it is that we're experiencing, it won't be for the sake of the technology, but it will be for the sake of this social communal experience. And one of the things that kind of drives me crazy about sort of life in general these days and at theme parks is I'll go and I'll see people's heads buried in their phones. And sometimes that's by design, because the theme park maybe has an app that requires you to make a reservation for a ride or make a reservation for a restaurant or show your ticket or whatever. So people are always looking at their phones. And I wish people would put their phones in their pockets and be present with one another and go on the attractions and delight in other people's company and kind of get away from the technology for a moment. So, you asked me specifically, what do I think AI may, what may we see as a result of AI? I think, and excuse me, that's my dog
Yeah.
Rico here, but he's, hey Rico. Shh.
It's all good, Rico.
Okay.
He wants to go on the rides.
He does want to go on the rides. I think one of the things we may see is maybe more personalization. I think theme parks have long been trying to create experiences where we as visitors get to experience something that's wholly unique to us. And I think AI may give them the tools to create something where we may go on an attraction and we may experience it differently than the person behind us because somehow the AI technology is being leveraged to deliver something to us that we would appreciate because it knows what we like and where we come from and whether we're older or younger or male or female or whatever it may be. So I think AI may be leveraged for things like personalization, but again, however it's used, I hope and I pray and I believe that it will be used in a way that we won't be experiencing these things, sort of isolated and separate from other people, but we'll be doing it in the way that we've always done it at theme parks and amusement parks, and that's together with other people. And it's not technology for the sake of technology, it's technology for the sake of
making the experience better for everyone.
Making the experience better, for telling a story, and for immersing us in a world that we can experience together with other people.
So, and as we wrap up, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? You're like, yes, I have 100 questions. I have 100 thoughts. Yeah.
I'm not sure that that I can necessarily think of anything right now, other than I would say maybe that in this crazy world that we live in, I kind of alluded to this a little bit before. We live in such a fragmented world and such a divided world that I truly believe theme parks and amusement parks are places where we can set all of that aside. And so I would encourage people to go to the theme park and go to the amusement park and forget about life for a while. The price of gas may be high and there may be wars going on and there may be political divisiveness, but when we're at the theme park, we can be present and we can all share an experience together. And I would encourage people to maybe do that and maybe bring a little joy into their life and a little joy into the world.
Arthur Levine, thank you so much for joining me. To find out more, the Substack is Arthur's About Theme Parks.
The URL is about, ABOUT, themeparks.fun. That's F-U-N. So if people just want to go to about themeparks.fun, they can sign up for my weekly newsletter. It's absolutely free. There is a paid option where they can get bonus content, but it's free to join my weekly newsletter at aboutthemeparks.fun. And every week in their email inbox, they'll get my latest article about the world of theme parks and amusement parks.
And so, as Arthur just told you what to do, follow his instructions and go there to the website. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, everyone, be safe.